I shouldn't have looked at her that way. Not in that room, not with my boss sitting just a wall away, not when she was his older sister. But the moment she turned her head and smiled, I knew I was already too far gone. It started on a Tuesday evening, long after most people had left the office. I was finishing up a report when my boss called me into his office. He wanted me to help someone set up her laptop. Just a quick favor, he said, barely looking up. That someone turned out to be her. She stood by the window when I walked in, sleeves of her blouse rolled neatly to her elbows, her hair swept back in a way that looked both effortless and deliberate. She wasn't dressed like the other women I usually saw around the office. No bright colors, no loud patterns. Just a soft gray blouse, dark trousers, and a thin silver bracelet that caught the light every time she moved her wrist. She looked like she belonged somewhere quieter than this building, like a library or a late-night cafe. "Are you the one who's supposed to rescue me from this machine?" she asked, her voice low, warm, with a teasing edge. I nodded, suddenly too aware of how young I must have looked in comparison, shirt sleeves wrinkled, tie half loosened. "I'll do my best," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She stepped aside so I could reach the desk, but she didn't move far. The space between us felt deliberate, and when she leaned slightly closer to point at the screen, I caught the faint scent of her perfume, something soft, unfamiliar, almost like rain-soaked wood. Her presence unsettled me. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made it hard to think. We made small talk as I clicked through settings. She told me she was in town for a few weeks, helping her brother with some family paperwork. She spoke with ease, but I noticed the way her hand sometimes lingered near her bracelet, turning it without realizing. A nervous habit, maybe? I answered when she asked about my work, but I kept it short. I didn't trust myself not to say too much. Every word I gave her felt loaded with something unspoken. At one point, she leaned closer, peering at the screen. Her shoulder brushed mine, just lightly, just enough. It should have been nothing, but I froze. She didn't move back right away. Instead, her eyes flicked toward me, holding mine for a moment longer than casual. I looked away first. The laptop finally connected, her files syncing smoothly. "There," I said a little too quickly. "It should work fine now." She smiled, not polite, not formal. Something warmer. "Thank you. You've saved me." My chest tightened at the way she said it. I wanted to answer, to say something clever, but all that came out was, "Anytime." We stood there in the quiet office, the only sound the faint hum of the computer. She didn't rush to leave. Neither did I. The air felt charged, like we were both waiting for something to break it. Then she tilted her head, studying me the way people study paintings, like there was more hidden beneath the surface. Her lips parted, as if she was about to say something, then closed again. Instead, she asked softly, almost too casually, "Do you ever find yourself in places you shouldn't be?" Her eyes didn't leave mine. And just like that, the ground shifted beneath us. Her question, "Do you ever find yourself in places you shouldn't be?" sat between us like an open secret. I should have laughed it off, made some joke about late nights at the office. But my throat tightened, and for a second, I couldn't think of anything but the truth. "Yes," I said too quickly. "More often than I'd like." Her lips curved, not into a smile exactly, but something softer, unreadable. She looked back at the laptop, tapping the edge of the desk with her finger, though she didn't seem to see the screen anymore. Danger. That's what this was. Not the obvious kind, not something that could be written down or explained, but the kind you feel in the chest, the sharp pull between what you want and what you know better than to touch. She was my boss's sister. He trusted me. I had everything to lose. Still, I found myself watching the small things about her, the way her hair loosened from behind her ear as she tilted her head, the faint crease at her brow when she thought too hard, the way her bracelet slid against her skin whenever she twisted it absent-mindedly. Every detail felt too close, too personal, like I was memorizing something I had no right to keep. "You're quieter than most," she said after a pause. Her tone was observational, not unkind. "Your brother." She stopped herself, then corrected. "My brother, he always fills the room." "You don't." I shrugged, not sure what to do with the observation. "Talking isn't always worth it." Her eyes met mine again, searching. "Or maybe you just haven't found the right person to talk to." That landed harder than it should have. I wanted to answer, to admit something, about how restless I'd been, how people my age seemed shallow, how being around her made me feel like I wasn't just passing time. But I swallowed it back. "You sound like you've been through this before," I said instead, shifting the attention back to her. For the first time, her gaze faltered. She looked toward the window, her voice quieter. "I'm still trying to figure out what this is." There it was, something cracked open. A hint of loss, of something unfinished in her life. I wondered if it was divorce, a breakup, years spent on someone who didn't deserve her. She didn't say, and I didn't push. But the silence that followed felt heavy, intimate, like I was holding a part of her she hadn't meant to give away. I leaned against the desk, pretending to study the laptop, though my pulse beat fast in my ears. Every instinct screamed to leave, to walk out before I crossed the line. Instead, I stayed. And then, her hand reached out, light as a whisper, brushing my sleeve. Not a grab, not even a full touch. Just enough to stop me from moving away. "Would you," she began, her voice low, tentative, "stay a little longer? Just for tonight." The room seemed to shrink around us, and I knew nothing about this was simple anymore. I told myself I should leave. That staying, even for a minute, was a mistake I'd regret. But when she asked me to, I didn't move. I sat down instead on the chair opposite her, pretending like it was nothing. She leaned back slightly, her fingers still resting on the desk. "It's been a long day," she murmured. "Sometimes it feels like every day is a long one." There was a weight in her voice I hadn't heard before. Something she carried quietly, like a bag no one offered to hold for her. I wanted to ask what she meant, but I didn't. Instead, I found myself watching the way her thumb rubbed circles over her bracelet, a habit that told me more than words. She noticed me noticing. And for the first time, she didn't hide it. "Old gift," she said, giving the bracelet a small twist. "Not much use now, but I can't take it off. Feels dishonest." Her honesty unsettled me. She didn't owe me anything, yet she gave me that piece of herself. "You don't have to explain," I said quietly. Her eyes lifted to mine. They held there, unblinking, as if she was testing whether I'd look away again. I didn't. The air thickened with everything unsaid. My hand rested on the arm of the chair, and when she shifted, her fingers brushed mine, barely, maybe even by accident, but enough to light something sharp inside me. I froze. So did she. Neither of us moved for a breath too long. Then, her phone buzzed. The sound shattered the moment. She grabbed it quickly, her voice soft but rushed when she answered. Yes, I'm fine. No, I don't need anything." A pause, then a forced laugh. "I'm not alone. I've got help." Her eyes flicked to me as she said it. When the call ended, she set the phone down, exhaling slowly. "My brother," she explained. "He worries. He doesn't realize how capable I still am." Still. That word caught me. Like she was trying to convince herself as much as anyone else. "You are," I said too firmly. Her mouth quirked at the edge, but not in amusement, more like she wanted to believe me. She leaned forward then, close enough that I could see the faint lines at the corners of her eyes, the kind life etches when it hasn't always been kind. "You shouldn't say things like that," she whispered. "I meant it," I replied, though my voice barely carried. She didn't move back. Neither did I. The hum of the building felt louder, the lights harsher, as if everything outside this moment was straining to pull us apart. And still, I couldn't stop leaning closer, couldn't stop imagining what would happen if I closed the small distance left. Her hand lingered near mine again, just shy of touching. She looked at me, her breath caught halfway between words. And I realized, I wasn't sure if we were still holding back. I didn't remember moving closer, only that suddenly her knee brushed mine under the desk. Neither of us pulled away. It wasn't deliberate, but it wasn't nothing either. The silence between us stretched so thin it could snap. She exhaled slowly, the sound shaky, unguarded. "You don't make this easy," she whispered. My heart stuttered. "I don't?" Her gaze locked on mine, steady, searching. "No. You look at me like you see something I've been trying to hide for years." The words hit me harder than I expected. I swallowed, my throat dry. "Maybe I do." Her lips parted, as though to argue, but no words came. Instead, she leaned back slightly, her hand rising to her temple as though she needed to steady herself. "This shouldn't be happening," she said, but her voice betrayed her, too soft, too unsure. I should have agreed. I should have laughed it off, found some way to make it less dangerous. But I couldn't. My chest was too full, my restraint too thin. "It already is," I said. That stopped her. Her eyes widened, not with shock, but with recognition. Like she'd been waiting for me to admit it out loud. Her bracelet clinked lightly against the desk as her hand lowered, fingers curling. "You're too young," she murmured. "And I should know better." "I don't care." The words came out before I could soften them. "I can't pretend I don't feel this." There it was. The truth, raw and unpolished, hanging heavy in the air. Her breathing quickened, and for the first time, she didn't look composed. She looked torn open, like someone standing on the edge of a choice they couldn't take back. "You'll regret saying that," she said finally, her voice breaking slightly on the last word. "Maybe. But I'll regret not saying it more." The honesty cut through both of us. She leaned forward again, elbows on her knees, her face inches from mine. I could see everything, the faint tremor in her lashes, the tension in her jaw, the way her chest rose unevenly. She searched me, almost desperately, as if weighing every cost and consequence in real time. My pulse hammered against my ribs. I wanted to reach out, to close the distance, but I didn't. "Not yet. Tell me," she said, barely above a whisper, "what it is you think you feel." Her question hung in the charged air, impossible to answer cleanly. My mouth opened, then closed. Every possible reply felt too big, too dangerous. So instead, I just looked at her, longer than I should have, deeper than was safe, until the silence between us carried everything I couldn't say. She didn't look away. And in that silence, it felt like the world tilted, like the next word, the next breath, might undo us both. Her question still hung in the air. "Tell me what it is you think you feel." I hadn't answered. I couldn't. The silence was too loud, too fragile. Then she pulled back suddenly, her expression unreadable. She stood, crossing to the window, her hand lifting the blinds just enough to let in the dim streetlight glow. "You remind me of someone," she said, her voice low, almost distant. I blinked. "Someone?" She nodded, still facing the glass. "Years ago. Before my marriage. Before I forgot who I was. He was younger too. Confident. Reckless. He said all the things you just said tonight." The admission caught me off guard. My chest tightened. "And what happened?" Her hand lingered on the blinds, the metal rattling faintly under her fingers. "I told him no. I told him I was too old, too careful, too—" She cut herself off with a shake of her head. "He left. And for a long time, I wondered if I'd sent away the one person who ever really saw me." Her voice cracked on the last words. I didn't know what to say. I only knew that her honesty wasn't just about the past, it was about now. About me. "You don't have to wonder anymore," I said quietly. She turned then, slowly, her eyes shining with something I hadn't seen before, fear, maybe, or hope. Maybe both. Before either of us could move, there was a knock at the door. Sharp. Sudden. We both froze. Her eyes widened. She pressed a finger to her lips, then stepped closer, whispering, "Don't say a word." The knock came again, heavier this time. A familiar voice followed, my boss's voice. Her brother. "Everything okay in there?" he called. "It's late." I felt my pulse race, my body tensing like a trapped animal. She moved quickly, slipping to the door, cracking it just enough to peek out. "I'm fine," she said smoothly. "He's just been helping me set things up." "We're almost done." Her brother grunted something indistinct, then his footsteps retreated down the hall. The silence that followed was deafening. She closed the door slowly, leaning against it, her hand pressed flat against the wood as if holding it shut with more than just her weight. When she turned back to me, her expression was raw, stripped of the composure she'd been clinging to all night. "You see?" she whispered. "This is why it can happen. One wrong step, and everything unravels, for you, for me." I stood, unable to stop myself. "Then why didn't you let me go?" Her breath caught. She didn't answer right away. She just looked at me, her chest rising and falling too fast. Finally, she whispered, "Because the thought of losing this, losing you, feels worse than being caught." The room spun with the weight of her confession. And I realized, everything had just shifted. Her words still echoed through me. "Because the thought of losing this, losing you, feels worse than being caught." I couldn't move at first. My mind tried to replay the sentence, to weigh what it meant, but my body had already decided. I crossed the room slowly, as though any sudden movement would shatter the fragile air between us. She didn't back away. She just stood there against the door, her hand still pressed flat to it, her eyes locked on mine like she was daring me to say something she couldn't take back. I stopped just a breath away. Close enough to feel the warmth of her, close enough that every detail etched itself into me, the faint freckles at her collarbone, the tremor in her fingers, the way her lips parted like she was already bracing for what might come next. "We can't pretend anymore," I said quietly. Her throat moved as she swallowed. "No. We can't." I should have been afraid. Afraid of her brother finding out, afraid of what people would think, afraid of what this would cost me, or her. But in that moment, none of it mattered. The only fear that held me was the thought of walking away. "You asked me what I feel," I continued, my voice shaking despite myself. "It's this. Right now. Wanting to stay, even when I know I shouldn't." Her eyes softened, the tension in her face breaking into something raw, something unguarded. She let out a shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it, only relief, like she'd been holding her breath for years. "I've wanted to hear those words for so long," she whispered. The confession nearly undid me. My hand lifted before I could stop it, brushing against her arm, then her shoulder. She closed her eyes at the touch, a sharp exhale slipping from her like she'd been waiting for it all night. "Tell me to go," I murmured, my hand trembling against her sleeve. "If you tell me, I'll walk out right now." Her eyes opened, meeting mine, steady despite the storm inside them. "Don't go." The words broke whatever barrier was left. She leaned forward first, barely, hesitantly, but enough. Our foreheads touched, our breaths mingling in the small space between. It wasn't a kiss yet, but it was closer than anything I'd ever known. A promise, a surrender, a risk we both chose to take. The silence was heavy, loaded with everything we'd said and everything we hadn't. For once, it didn't feel like running from something. It felt like stepping into it, together. And when her hand finally slipped to mine, fingers curling tightly, I knew the decision had already been made. There was no going back. Her fingers laced with mine, and that small, deliberate act undid weeks, maybe years, of restraint. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't reckless. It was quiet, two people deciding that silence had kept them apart long enough. We didn't speak right away. We just stood there, the hum of the office settling around us like a witness. I realized then that every moment leading here, the glances, the almost touches, the words bitten back, had been pointing to this. Not an accident. Not a mistake. A choice. She finally broke the silence. I don't know how this ends, she whispered. I don't even know what tomorrow looks like. I don't care about tomorrow, I said, my voice steady for the first time all night. I just know I don't want tonight to be the last time I'm standing here with you. Her eyes softened, shimmering with something that felt like relief. She let out a breath that sounded more like surrender than fear. You're too young for this kind of certainty. Or maybe, I said, brushing my thumb over her knuckles, I just know what I don't want to lose. For the first time, she smiled, fully, openly, without the mask she'd been wearing since I met her. It wasn't polished. It wasn't practiced. It was hers, and I wanted to be the reason she kept smiling like that. The rest of the night blurred into conversation, into laughter we hadn't allowed ourselves before, into confessions that had waited too long. She told me about the years she wasted in a marriage that dimmed her spirit. I told her about the restlessness I'd carried, the way nothing and no one had felt enough until her. By the time we finally stepped outside, the city was quiet. A thin drizzle slicked the pavement, reflecting the streetlights in fractured gold. She pulled her jacket tighter, and without thinking, I moved closer, our shoulders brushing as we walked. This time, neither of us pulled away. Something had changed. Not just between us, but within us. She no longer looked like someone trying to hide behind composure. I no longer felt like the young man who didn't belong. For a moment, the difference in our ages, our positions, our lives, it all fell away. What remained was the undeniable truth: we had found each other, against reason, against expectation, and we'd chosen not to let go. Maybe tomorrow would bring complications. Maybe her brother would find out. Maybe the world would question us. But tonight, all that mattered was the simple, fragile certainty that we were no longer standing alone. And sometimes, that's enough. Red Heart, did you enjoy the story? Sparkles, what kind of stories would you like to hear next?